He was just passing by pressed suit polished shoes, phone buzzing when the sound of metal slamming against tile made him stop. A lunchbox, pink dented, thrown open with force. A little girl's fists trembled. Her lips moved, but no sound came. A crumpled note. He leaned closer. No food, just ink. I'll try again tomorrow. Love, Mum. His breath caught. Eyes met hers, wide, defiant, starving, pretending to serve a feast with invisible forks. In that moment, everything around him, cars, meetings, wealth, blurred. He didn't know her name. He didn't know what he was about to do, but he knew nothing would be the same again. If you want to know what happens next, stay with me until the end of the video. And if you still believe deep in your heart that God is always watching over you silently, arranging everything then right now, leave a comment saying Amen below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write those words, a blessing may quietly enter your life. Ethan Walker didn't usually make unplanned stops. His calendar ran like clockwork, clean lines, quiet boardrooms, predictable people. But that Thursday morning, while passing through Scranton to deliver a donation envelope to the local school, he caught a sound that tugged at something he couldn't name. The school cafeteria was alive with noise trays, clattering sneakers, squeaking voices, tumbling over one another like a creek in spring. Ethan paused outside the open doors, unsure why he'd even slowed. And then he saw her. A little girl, no older than 7, sat alone at the far end of the room. She had long dark braids and a faded pink lunchbox in front of her. While other kids tore open sandwiches or swapped snacks, she was arranging nothing. An invisible spoon stirred invisible soup. Her small voice floated out, polite, practiced. "Welcome to my restaurant, sir. Would you like a table?" Ethan blinked, taken off guard. She was looking right at him. He stepped closer, unsure if he was intruding. "If you have one available," he said, surprised by his own words. She smiled, proud and poised. "Of course. Right this way." She gestured to the spot across from her. Ethan sat awkwardly at the tiny bench, knees nearly at his chest. Around them the room moved on laughing children, busy aides. But inside their little pocket of space, it was just the two of them. "Today's special is spaghetti with magic sauce," she said seriously. "And for dessert, a surprise." He played along, lifting an invisible fork. "Sounds delicious." With a flourish, she opened the pink lunchbox. Inside was a single folded note. She read it quickly, then snapped the box shut. But not before Ethan saw the words. "I'm sorry there's no food today. I'll try again tomorrow. Love, Mum." His chest tightened. He'd read thousands of business reports, statements, memos, but nothing had hit him like those 2 lines. She kept talking, unfazed. "I make the sauce with special herbs. Only for my favorite customers." He nodded, his throat tight. "It's the best I've ever had." She beamed, pleased. Her hands moved with graceful ease, miming plates, napkins, a careful pour of pretend lemonade. He watched her, this little girl, carrying hunger like a secret, wrapping it in imagination. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Maya," she said. "Maya Morales. Nice to meet you, Maya." She gave a slight bow like a real hostess. "Thank you for dining with us." When the recess bell rang, she packed the empty lunchbox with practiced care. She stood up, gave him a little wave, and walked away like a child who had just completed a successful shift. Ethan sat for a long moment, still holding his imaginary fork. He had come to donate a check. That was the plan. Write it off. Move on. But now he wasn't thinking about tax write-offs or photo ops. He was thinking about the weight of that lunchbox, or lack of it. That night he found himself staring at the ceiling of his hotel room. He couldn't stop picturing her face, the way she smiled, as if nothing was missing. He realized then it wasn't charity that was needed. It was something far deeper. And for reasons he couldn't quite explain, Ethan Walker, a man who prided himself on never looking back, knew he'd be returning to that cafeteria. Ethan Walker had never shopped for a lunchbox before. The store near the courthouse downtown was quiet that morning, just him, a high school kid at the register, and a wall of bright plastic containers. He chose the one with sunflowers. It was cheerful, sturdy, and he didn't overthink it. He just knew Maya should have something better than that faded pink box that held nothing but apology. Inside it, he packed what he thought a kid might like. Pasta, sliced apples, a small piece of chocolate. He even included a folded napkin, as if the detail would matter. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. But it felt like the first real thing he'd done in a long time that didn't involve a boardroom. At the school gates, he waved off his driver. "You don't need to wait," he said. The cafeteria looked the same as the day before, chaotic and warm. Children filled the benches and trays, clattered as usual. But in the far corner, Ethan spotted her. Maya. Same braids, same posture, but when she saw him, her face lit up with unmistakable delight. "You came back," she said, like it was obvious he would. "I saved you a table." Ethan smiled, set the paper bag down, and pulled out the new lunchbox. "I thought maybe your restaurant deserved an upgrade," he said. Her mouth dropped open. She touched the box like it was made of glass. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Want to see what's inside?" he asked. She nodded, then opened it slowly. When she saw the food, real food, her hands paused. The cafeteria around them carried on, but in that small space, time shifted. "This is all for me?" she asked. "For you," Ethan said, "but only if you promise to share with your customers." She laughed, a light bubbling sound that made heads at nearby tables turn. "Of course." And just like that, her restaurant came to life. Maya broke the apple slices in half, handed pasta to the two boys nearest her, and called out, "We're serving a special today." A few girls wandered over, curious. She offered them food like it was nothing, like she'd always had more than enough. Ethan didn't speak. He just watched. She gave away nearly everything before she took a bite herself. When she did, she closed her eyes and smiled like it was magic. "This is the best pasta I've ever had," she said, and somehow he believed her. She glanced over at him. "My mum says not to take things from strangers," she admitted. Ethan kept his tone soft. "She's smart. She is." Maya nodded quickly. She used to work at a factory that made clothes in Florence, but they said they didn't need her anymore. Ethan froze. "She cries sometimes, but she tells me it'll be okay." Maya looked down at the lunchbox. "That's why I had to pretend yesterday. I didn't want anyone to know." He swallowed hard. "Florence?" he asked. Maya nodded, still tracing the sunflower pattern with her finger. "Yeah, she said it was a good job until it wasn't." Ethan didn't respond. His thoughts raced: contracts, cost projections, meetings with legal, the Florence facility. He'd seen it in quarterly reports recommended the restructuring. He hadn't known names, just numbers. "I'm sorry your mum lost her job," he said finally. Maya looked up. "She's strong. She still makes things sometimes. And she tells me to keep drawing." From her backpack she pulled a folded paper. A drawing, 3 people sitting at a table. A woman with long hair, a girl with braids, and a tall man in a suit. "That's me and Mama Maya," said, pointing. Then she tapped the 3rd figure. "That's you. You came to dinner." Ethan stared at the drawing. A cartoon version of him smiled in crayon. Something cracked open in his chest. "Can I keep this?" he asked. "Yes," she said, "because if you keep it, that means you'll come back again." "I will," he promised. The bell rang. Children gathered their things, and Maya packed the now empty sunflower box with care. Ethan walked her to the hallway where she waved without hesitation. "Don't forget she called." He didn't say a word, but he touched the folded drawing in his pocket like it was something fragile. As he left the school, the echo of her voice stayed with him. Back in his office that afternoon, the drawing lay on his desk. His assistant asked if he needed anything. He waved her away. On a notepad, he wrote 3 words: "No food today." Then he circled them, again and again, because somehow those words mattered more than anything else on his calendar. The stairwell smelled of old bread and damp stone, a scent Ethan couldn't place but somehow trusted. The building was small, wedged between a shuttered corner bakery and a shop that sold used books. He climbed slowly, his polished shoes clicking against the chipped steps. It was a far cry from the sleek elevators and quiet marble lobbies he was used to, but none of that mattered today. Maya had told him the apartment was above the bakery. "We don't buy bread from downstairs," she'd said, "but the smell's free." He remembered that line more clearly than he expected. There was something in the way she'd said it, matter of fact, no bitterness. Just a child living with what was. He reached the 2nd floor and knocked. There was a pause, then the sound of light feet rushing a lock turning. "Mama, it's him!" Maya's voice chirped behind the door. The door opened halfway. A woman stood there, slim, early 30s, her dark hair pulled back. Her eyes, though tired, were sharp, measuring. "Mr. Walker," she said carefully. Ethan offered a small nod. "Thank you for letting me visit." "I didn't exactly," she replied, but stepped back and opened the door wider. The apartment was modest. A small bed tucked in the corner, a foldable table near a cracked window, a hot plate beside a chipped sink. The curtain fluttered weakly with the breeze. It wasn't much, but it was clean, respectfully arranged. A stack of unopened mail sat neatly on the table, red-stamped envelopes peeking out beneath a magazine. Maya was already on the floor, spreading out her crayons and a stack of papers like they were precious treasures. "I'm working on a new menu," she said proudly. Ethan smiled. "That's good. Every restaurant needs updates." Lena Morales didn't sit. She leaned lightly against the wall, arms crossed. She looked thinner than she should have, not in the fashionable way, but in the quiet, survival kind of way. Her hands were calloused, one resting on the other. "You brought her the lunchbox," she said finally. "I did," Ethan replied. "She shared it with half the cafeteria. She always shares, even when there's nothing to give. She said you used to work at the Florence textile plant." Lena's eyes flicked up at that sharp. "I did. 11 years. Ethan swallowed. "That was a long time. It was stable. Until it wasn't. They said costs were too high," he murmured. "They did," Lena said. Said we were being streamlined. Funny word. Sounds clean. He looked around the apartment. I'm sorry. Lena gave a short, dry laugh. Sorry doesn't pay rent, Mr. Walker. But I'm not asking for pity. I found work when I could. Offices, laundry, mending dresses. When I got sick, it became harder. He nodded. She told me you were strong. Lena's eyes softened just slightly. She's stronger. They both looked at Maya, who was now drawing a plate of spaghetti complete with meatballs and steam. Ethan almost smiled. Do you mind if I ask, he began, why you didn't reach out for assistance? Lena raised her chin a little. Because help comes with labels and strings. People start talking slower to you like you forgot how to think. I want Maya to believe her mother was capable. That's all. He respected that, deeply. It also made him feel smaller than he had in years. Lena walked to the window, looked out at the street. I know who you are, she said after a long pause. I know you own the company that shut us down. Ethan stood very still. I don't blame you for visiting, she continued. I blame you for not knowing what it did to us. He opened his mouth, but no words came. You're here now, she said, voice quiet but firm. That's something. From the floor, Maya held up another drawing. Look, she said. It's our new house. Mama, me, and Mr. Walker. Lena looked at the picture. 3 stick figures smiling, holding hands in front of a tiny blue house. You've only been in her life for 2 days, Lena said, voice low, and she already drew you in. I didn't ask her to, Ethan said gently. You didn't have to. The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was simply heavy with truth, with memory, with consequence. I want to help, he said finally. Not just as a visitor. Lena turned. Then help her first. He nodded. When he left the apartment, the stairwell seemed narrower. The city outside looked the same, but something had shifted. He wasn't carrying a briefcase. He was carrying a drawing folded neatly tucked into his jacket. He kept his hand over it the entire way back to the car. The apartment was quiet, save for the low hum of the refrigerator and the soft scratch of pen on paper. Lena Morales sat at the small kitchen table, her shoulders hunched, wrapped in an old robe. The overhead bulb flickered now and then, casting shifting shadows across the stack of papers in front of her shift logs, photocopied memos, scribbled notes from days when her employee badge still worked. It was nearly 1 a.m., but she didn't feel tired. Exhaustion had long since faded into background noise. What kept her awake now was something sharper, clearer. Not rage, not even fear. It was resolve. A yellow legal pad sat open before her, filled with names and dates. Next to each, incidents unreported overtime. That wasn't optional safety violations no one followed up on. She'd spent the past week collecting everything she could find, borrowing from old contacts, asking quiet questions, piecing together a story no one had wanted to tell. A copied email directive from upper management lay near the top of the pile. Reduce headcount by 18% before Q4. Focus on low output teams. She remembered the day she'd lost her job, how sudden, how cold. At the time it felt arbitrary. Now, with the puzzle slowly revealing itself, she saw the pattern. Her name hadn't been random. It had been strategy. She hadn't told Ethan. Not yet. Not because she didn't trust him deep down. She suspected he'd care more than most, but because this wasn't his to fix. This wasn't charity. This was justice. A yawn from the hallway broke the silence. Maya stood barefoot in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep, dragging her blanket behind her like a cape. "Mama," she whispered, "you're still up." "Just working," Lena said, closing the file slowly. "Go back to sleep, honey." But Maya didn't move. She shuffled to the table, climbed into a chair beside her mother, and laid her head on Lena's arm. "Can I help?" Lena smiled. "You already are." Maya's eyes flicked to the paper poking out from beneath her mother's hand. "Is that about the factory?" Lena hesitated. "Sort of." Maya lifted her head. "I wrote something too. Today. At school." Lena raised an eyebrow. "You did?" The girl nodded seriously. "We were supposed to write about something that should be better." "So?" "I wrote about lunch. Lunch, about how some kids don't have enough. I didn't say who, but I said it's not fair." She paused, then added shyly, "I drew a picture too, of all of us eating together. I gave it to the school secretary. She said she'd show it to the board." Lena stared at her stunned. "Why didn't you tell me?" Maya shrugged. "I wanted it to be a surprise. And you were busy." For a moment, Lena couldn't speak. She reached over and pulled her daughter into a hug. "You did something really brave," she whispered. "I'm proud of you." The next morning, across town, Ethan Walker stared at the drawing Maya had given him days earlier. It still hung on his office wall, 3 children at a table, the sun painted above them in uneven yellow strokes. He hadn't shown it to anyone. Something about it felt sacred. His assistant knocked on the glass. "Mr. Walker, the Scranton Herald is asking for a statement." He turned. "About what?" "They're running a story tomorrow. Student hunger. There's mention of an anonymous letter from a child. The school has confirmed parts of it." Ethan stood slowly. "Should I prepare a response?" "No," he said. "Not yet." He left his office, walked past the executive conference room, and entered an empty lounge. No lights. Just the view Florence stretched below, sunlight bouncing off the rooftops. He used to love this view. Now it looked distant, impersonal. He thought of Maya's letter, of Lena gathering documents in a tiny apartment, fighting a system he had helped build. They hadn't asked for his help. They were already moving with or without him. Later that afternoon, Marcus Dean, senior reporter at the Scranton Herald, sat at his cluttered desk, rereading the child's letter for the 5th time. "Some kids pretend they're not hungry, but I can tell. I pretended to." The pencil handwriting was shaky. The message was clear. He'd interviewed the school principal, who confirmed that yes, some students quietly went without meals. "It's not always visible," she had said, "but it's real." Marcus leaned back and cracked his knuckles. Then he opened a new document. The invisible lunch line. What a child's letter revealed about hunger in Florence. He looked at the picture, crayon-coloured, folded 3 times. It stayed taped to the edge of his monitor. When the story ran the next morning, it caught fire. Parents shared it. Teachers passed it along. On social media, it spread faster than the Herald expected. People weren't just reading it, they were feeling it. Ethan read it 3 times in his office. Every sentence echoed with Maya's voice. He picked up the phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years, legal aid's hotline from the old employee packets. A woman answered. "Nina Carter," she said. "This is Ethan Walker," he replied, his voice steady. "I think we need to talk." The boardroom at Orion Textiles had been designed to impress. 12 high-backed leather chairs lined a gleaming mahogany table, and the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Florence, its domes, its winding streets, its illusion of calm. Everything about this space suggested permanence and control. Ethan Walker sat at the head of the table, the place he had occupied for nearly a decade. He had once felt at home here. Now he felt like a trespasser in his own kingdom. The morning headline from the Scranton Herald lay open in front of him, letter from a hungry child sparks outcry across Florence. Beside it was a copy of Maya's drawing, the one with the long lunch table and the son in the corner where she had drawn him beside her mother. He had read it 5 times. The room was silent until Martin Grayson, the CFO, finally spoke. "The story's gone national," he said, adjusting his glasses. "We're being flooded with media requests. There's even a hashtag now, #Lunchbox Justice." One of the board members chuckled dryly. "Since when do we base strategy on crayons and hashtags?" Ethan didn't smile. "The letter isn't the problem," he said. "The silence before it was." A few eyes shifted around the table. He could feel their unease. "The layoffs in Florence saved us 4.3 million euros. Last year," Martin interjected, "we followed procedure. We did what any major firm would have done." Ethan's voice was calm but resolute. "And what did it cost?" Silence again. He stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city that had once felt like his to command. Now it looked different, smaller, more fragile. "I authorized those cuts," he continued. "I signed the directive. And I never once asked who would carry the weight of that decision, until I met a little girl pretending to eat invisible food from an empty lunchbox." "That's not our fault," another executive said. "That's a family problem, a community issue. Our job is to run a business." "No," Ethan said. He turned around, voice firm. "Our job is to lead, and leadership means accountability." He returned to his seat and opened a folder he'd brought. Inside were 3 documents. He slid them across the table. "First, I want Lena Morales reinstated with full back pay. Second, I propose a community partnership with Florence Public Schools, full meal coverage for all students starting with Maya's school. Third, we initiate an internal audit of our HR and layoff processes across all Italian branches." Martin's jaw tightened. "You're asking us to rewrite policy over a single child's drawing?" "No," Ethan replied. "I'm asking us to remember that behind every policy is a person. In this case, a child brave enough to tell the truth." "What about shareholders?" someone else asked. "What do we tell them?" "We tell them the truth," Ethan said. "That we are changing. That efficiency cannot come at the cost of dignity." There was pushback, of course, concerns about precedent, investor backlash, operational risks. But Ethan didn't budge. For once, he wasn't negotiating. He was choosing. By the time the meeting adjourned, his hands were trembling not from fear, but from release. He had carried so much for so long under the guise of composure. But today he had acted as the man Maya believed he could be. That afternoon, Ethan drove himself to Lena's apartment. No driver, no assistant, just him. Maya opened the door, beaming. Her sunflower lunchbox was still clutched in one arm, like treasure. "You came back," she said. "I promised, didn't I?" Lena appeared behind her, her expression cautious. She hadn't expected him, at least not so soon. Ethan handed her a manila envelope. "It's official," he said. "You're being offered your job back. Same pay, but this time with a voice in how things run." Lena stared at the envelope, then at him. "Why?" Because it should never have happened in the first place, Ethan said. And because your daughter reminded me that we're capable of better. Maya tugged at her mother's sleeve. Show him the new picture. From a nearby table, she pulled a folded sheet of paper. It was another drawing this time, a small house with 3 windows, a garden and 3 people holding hands, a woman, a girl, and a man in a suit with no briefcase. That's us, Maya said proudly. Our house, when we're all together. Lena looked at Ethan, her eyes softer now. You're not just here for PR, are you? No, Ethan said. I'm here because your daughter's letter changed something I can't undo, and because I want to be the kind of man she thinks I already am. They stood in silence for a moment, no speeches, no grand declarations, just the quiet understanding of 3 lives unexpectedly intertwined. And somewhere in that silence, the real turning point happened, not in the boardroom, not in the press, but in the small sacred space between forgiveness and hope. Spring in Florence arrived gently, like a whispered apology from the world. The scent of blooming jasmine drifted through narrow alleys, and sunlight painted warm patterns on stone streets that had seen centuries pass. But for Lena Morales, the true sign of change wasn't in the air. It was in the silence of her mornings, no longer filled with dread. She had returned to the factory not as a silent figure on the floor, but as a voice that mattered. Her new role as a liaison gave her the chance to advocate for her co-workers, many of whom had suffered like she had. With time, people stopped seeing her as the woman who had been laid off and started seeing her as the woman who had come back stronger. Each afternoon, she returned to the small apartment above the shuttered bakery where Maya would greet her with stories from school paint smudges on her fingers and an endless stream of questions about everything from sunflowers to stars. The lunchbox, once a shield, now sat proudly on the windowsill, empty but full of meaning. As for Ethan, he came often, not as a saviour and never with an entourage. Just as himself, a man who had once confused power with purpose, now learning to show up. Sometimes he brought groceries. Sometimes he just brought himself. Always he stayed for dinner. One afternoon, he helped Maya plant real sunflower seeds in small pots they'd found behind the bakery. You have to talk to them, Maya said seriously, pressing dirt around the stems. That's how they grow. Ethan knelt beside her. What should I say? Just that you're not going anywhere, she replied. He looked up to find Lena watching from the doorway, arms folded and almost smile on her lips. Later that night, the 3 of them sat at the dinner table, one too small for the emotions it held. Lena served lentil stew. Maya showed off a new drawing. And Ethan listened not with distraction, but with presence. When Maya had gone to bed, Lena spoke quietly. You've changed, Ethan. But the world hasn't. Not yet. I know, he said. But we started something. She looked at him for a long moment. Just promise me you won't forget. I won't, he said, because she won't let me. They both laughed softly, the kind of laugh that comes after storms. Outside, the city lights shimmered like distant stars. Inside, the silence was full not of fear or loss, but of peace. Ethan would never go back to who he was. The boardroom could wait. The headlines didn't matter. What mattered was this, a mother who had survived a child, who had imagined something better, and a man who had learned to stay. And in a cracked flower pot on a windowsill in Florence, a sunflower slowly turned its face to the sun. Today's story comes to an end, but its echo still lingers in the heart. What do you think? Give us a score from 1 to 10 and feel free to share a few words in the comments. Every voice here is valued and heard. Before you go, let me ask you gently, Are you doing okay today? If your heart feels heavy, let this place be a quiet corner where you can share and find comfort. See you again in the next bedtime story where love and hope remind us that no matter how dark the night may seem, kindness will always prevail.